Well, one of the things I've noticed about the pastors around here, we take advantage of things like this. I heard Steve talking just a moment ago about his wife and her birthday. So today, I'm just declaring this. This is my anniversary, 34 years today. I know. So honey, look at the party I planned for you, you know? Thank you for being here. However, she is in the back working with the kids, so thank you, babe. This is it. No, I do have a dinner planned for her later. Hey, I'm so glad you're here. We are starting this series today, and I wanted to do this series on faith because of where we're at as a culture. Let me explain. So when I was younger, growing up, I did not grow up in a Christian home, and yet our culture was, if somebody says, do you believe in God? We would all say, well, yeah, we believe in God. Fast forward a little bit, culture started to shift. And people started saying, I don't really believe in God because there's too many reasons, there's too many barriers, so I don't believe in God necessarily anymore. I'd like to, but I don't. Now we're at a place in culture where if somebody, a lot of people would say, are you kidding? That is a dumb thing to believe in God. It's stupid to believe in God. So I want to do this series about faith and believing in God. And I really believe we've gotten to a point where our problem is we have a distorted view of God. A lot of people who tell me the God they believe in or don't believe in, I don't believe in that God either. We don't have God's view of who he is and his character. So in this series, I want to dive into that a little bit and talk about God and putting our faith in the real God and who he is. And I want to illustrate this today a little bit by talking about God on demand. And so let's start with this. How many of you watch everything on demand nowadays? You watch whatever your version of on demand is. Anybody watch things on demand? Yeah, I mean, you get set up with Netflix, and you're just watching, Stranger Things on demand. You binge watch it, right? You don't watch one. You're like, oh, I can't wait to see it. The kids were telling me earlier, I can't wait for the next season of Stranger Things. We watch whole seasons at a time. I love on demand. I mean, we have church on demand. Did you know that? And we want to get a lot better at church on demand. I love on demand. If you're like me, you already have February 18th circled on your calendar because it's the Daytona 500. Everybody ready for that? I watch races a lot, but I watch them on demand so I can fast forward through the commercials and through the boring laps and get to the wrecks, right? Then I fast forward to the next wreck. I want to see what's happening there. So I understand this whole thing about on demand. We love that. However, it's dangerous when we start thinking about God being on demand. We've started getting to the place where as a culture we're so good at on demand that we say, God, if you'll just do this, give me this, answer this prayer, then I'll put my faith in you. Not even realizing we've crossed over from faith to really demanding of God. Instead of meeting God on his terms and who he is and understanding him, that we're saying, God, we want you to fit in our box, on our time, our schedule. I want to fast forward through all the bad things of life and just get to the good, and then I'll believe in you. And when he doesn't meet those demands, we think, God, you're not even real. How dumb is it to believe in that God? That's what we think. And yet we don't understand that that's not who God is. On-demand God does not exist. Now, let me illustrate this a little more. And the younger generation, you'll have to indulge me. I don't often indulge older generation, but I'm going to do that. I mean, my age and up. We're usually kind of illustrating with you guys. But if you're a little older, this is for you guys. I love to have fun in church. I think church should be fun. Don't you guys? Yeah. So let's have a little fun. And I want to see if you remember this show. You remember it? What's the line from this show? The plane. This was Fantasy Island, man. This was the show. I loved watching this show as a young teenager, and then later came like Baywatch and some of those. I'd sneak in and watch those, and there was this one. And then how about this one? Do you remember this? Yeah. And see, all the Netflix generation, we're going, where are these? Here's the thing with what we had to do with these shows when I was younger. If they were on, if Happy Days was on 7 o'clock Friday night, you know what we were doing 7 o'clock Friday night? We were sitting in front of the TV, popcorn ready, waiting. Because if you missed the show, you missed the show. You had to sit through commercials. You had to watch the show. And if you missed it, you weren't going to see it again for a couple years when they started the reruns, if you were lucky. And I know the younger generation, you're going, well, why didn't you guys just record it? We couldn't, that's why. You see, we live in this culture where we can't even think that way anymore. We don't live there anymore. And we want our faith to be like that. God on demand. God, why wouldn't you do this? Why wouldn't you do that? Why don't you answer this prayer or that prayer? And God's saying, I see the whole picture. You guys, we're missing it. We got a bad view of God. And yet the problem becomes that it takes faith. In fact, the Hebrews writer in the New Testament, God uses him, and he says, it is what? It's impossible to please God without faith. Everybody listening to my voice wrestles, has a hard time in some area of faith. We see that throughout all of the Bible. Those who interacted with Jesus, even though they were his followers, they stood right there with the miracles, they saw things, they still had problems with faith. We all do, and yet the problem becomes for us that it's impossible to please God without faith. But we see that faith is this journey of a relationship. Anyone who wants to come to him, to God, must believe that he exists, that God exists, and that he rewards those who sincerely ask him. But because it's a faith journey, we've gone all the way to taking the leap. We're so on demand that God, we don't even think you exist. And yet, that's the first step of faith. God, that you exist. Not on my terms, but you exist. Now, in that, I want to just talk about what faith is. Faith is one step at a time. Would you say this with me, Church Online? Let's read this together. Faith is one step. It's one step at a time. Just one step toward him. He's already taken this huge step toward us. He sent his son on the cross to pave a way for us to have a right relationship with him. Now, it's in our court to take that next step, one step at a time. Faith is one step at a time. We think of faith as leaps of faith, right? Have you ever used that term? Yep. Like a leap of faith. Now, I want to tell you, I love doing adventurous, dangerous things. I've been like that ever since I was a kid. Still am, still love to do it. I love it when I can interact it with what I do here at Alive. A few years ago, we did a series where I had to do several dangerous things. Just to film it, to use as illustrations. One of those was jumping out of an airplane. I loved it. I talked one of the pastors into going with me. I want you to watch this. Did you notice that was not a leap of faith? There's nothing in that. I know we think that sometimes, and I hear people who don't like doing dangerous things like, that's a leap of faith. No, it really wasn't. You see, it's not like I was with Jason. He's our executive pastor who did that with me. It's not like we were in an airplane one day and I said, hey, Jason, I got a great idea. Let's jump out of this plane. That's a leap of faith. No parachutes, we're just jumping. That's actually stupidity. You know, I'm not like it. Did you see the steps we had to take? We had to watch a movie. It took us a couple hours to get ready because they make you watch this movie. They make you sign all these contracts that if you die, your chute doesn't open. It was like, oh, come on. And we're signing all that. And then the trainers, they come out. They strap onto us one step at a time. They walked us through everything. And that's really more what faith is. It's one step. Faith is one step at a time. Say it with me. Faith is one step. The question we have to answer is, where am I on this narrative of life with God? Which step do I need to take? I've written a few of the steps that we think through, and boy, we expand this a lot more if we have bigger screens, but when we have this decision to follow Jesus, if I put that's ground zero. Some of you say, well, wait, I'm way down here. Really today, a friend invited me for the food. We have hamburgers. And they're free, so I came for that, but I really don't have an awareness of God. I'm so glad you're here. We built this place for you. There is no safer place for you to be to talk about and wrestle with questions than right here. We want you here. We celebrate that. But if you say, well, I'm clear down here, I don't have an expectation that you make a leap from no awareness to all the way up here. Some people do, but that's not the norm. Most people just say, I'm going to take one step up. Some of you are down here and the none are done. This is like none. When it comes to, you have all those questionnaires about religion, Christianity, faith issues, and you just say none of the above. I don't want anything to do with it. But the on-demand has set in so much that God has not proved himself by answering a prayer or giving me what I wanted. We just say none. I just don't believe he exists. Or you could be one of those done. You've been to church. You tried religion. You've had some painful experiences. It hurts. And you were like, I am so done with this stuff. I'm done with hypocritical Christians. I'm just done. And what you're saying is, because of people, I'm done with Jesus. And I hate to see that. We don't want to see that. And so we just say, take that next step, that you'd have a positive experience. That's my prayer for you today, is that this would be a positive experience, to where then you would begin to become interested in Jesus. And then take that step of faith. Now, for those of you who are followers of Jesus, some of you, you've stopped right here. You've put your faith in Jesus, but you've not taken the next step of growth. And you're just kind of stuck. And the problem with stuck is, eventually, if you're stuck long enough, you start going back the other way. You need to know that. And we get here even, and we're still on demand God. We're still saying, well, God, if you're real, and I put my faith in you, then my life should look like this or this. You should do this in my life. And because he doesn't do it the way we want, on demand, then we lose faith. But he's calling us to continue to take one step. Where are you on this continuum? Follower of Jesus or not follower of Jesus? And what's your next step? Faith is one step at a time. Now, to complicate this even more is a little bit of something of our personalities. And God has given us personalities. Everybody say, I got personality. You do, and I celebrate. We actually do teachings on this every couple of years. God's given you a personality, and we need to celebrate it. But we see Jesus talking about this. There's basically two kinds of personalities. They fall in two different areas. You must love the Lord your God, these are his words, with all your heart and soul. Heart and soul is a feeler type person. And all your mind and your strength. A mind and strength person is a thinker type person. Now, I'm not saying one's right or wrong. I'm not saying that a feeler doesn't have any thoughts. My wife's an extreme feeler. She's a very smart lady, if you know her. That's not it. This is just the prism of how she looks at life first. I'm a thinker. And it's not that I don't have any feelings. Some of you who know me are going, we're not sure about that. My wife would say different too sometimes. That's not it at all, but I always start with thinking first. Let me illustrate this to you. So Kathy and I recently doing a hospital, someone from the church in the hospital, very bad health, poor conditions, not looking good. However, as we talk with her, we realize this person, she's not taking care of herself. She really has done everything against what the doctors have said, and that's how she's ended up in this position. And the outcome or the prognosis is not very good. So as we're leaving the hospital, this lady says, man, I'm so mad at God for letting me get in this circumstance. So as we're driving away, my wife's like, oh, I just so feel for her. She's in this situation, and hearing her say she's mad at God, I just hate that. My response to my wife was, I wonder what God's saying. I wonder if he's kind of ticked at her for not taking care of her body, not exercising, not eating right. Now, which one of those are right? Neither one. My wife, brings me over to the side of saying, oh, I need be a little more compassionate. I bring her over to the side saying, hey, let's be a little more disciplined in what God has given us and take some responsibility. There's God's part and my part. If being a thinker or a feeler is not right or wrong. Now, if you say, I still don't know which one I am. Well, how do you know if you're a thinker or a feeler? Well, have you seen those commercials that come on TV with the dogs and the music and all the animals, and they're saving them all? I mean, that's great. But see, Kathy is so moved. I mean, right away, that music, she's crying. And Jeff, we need to give to help the dog. My thinking is, man, I wonder how much of that money I send them that they're going to use for administration and just having a job. Well, neither one is right or wrong. So we went to a movie this week. We went to a Western. My wife's crying through a Western. What's that all about? You know what I'm saying? And we walked out of the theater, we were with some friends, and he said, can it even be a Western if people cry? I don't know. But see, Kathy feels everything at the movies. Man, she's so caught up in the moment and all that they create, that tension and the excitement, all those CGI moments. And I'm sitting there while she's crying and all emotional, and I'm wishing I could experience it like that, but I'm sitting there going, now I wonder how they did that. And I wonder if I could use this in a teaching illustration somehow, I'm just always thinking that way. See, neither one's right or wrong. It's just how you're made up. And if you're still saying, well, I don't know which one I am, watch your conversation this week. Watch conversation of those around you. People who are feelers will say something like, man, I feel like we should do this. Thinkers will all say, I think we should do this. We speak it all the time. And so here's this prism that we have to look at life, and it is exactly how we look at faith. And especially when we start thinking about God on demand or feeling God on demand. Give me those feelings, Lord. Answer all my questions, Lord. And it becomes a faith issue. And I want to dive into that just a little deeper. Let's say this again together. Faith is one step. Thinker or feeler, it's still one step. Let's talk about the feelers. Those of you who are feelers, you have to be careful that you don't confuse faith with feelings. You love this when everything, and it's awesome when your feelings and your faith line up. What a day that is at church, right? Or in any moment. But feelers come in and they go, I just want to feel God. Man, feelers will tell me, man, God showed up in that service. And I'm like, what was your clue? Oh, I had this tingling moment, and just know that was God. Well, first of all, theologically, that's messed up because God is with you all. You brought him in if you're a follower of Jesus. He didn't have to show up like but those tingly feelings, when they line up with your faith, you're like, this is great. This is awesome. God is here. The danger is, if you're missing those feelings, you're going to find another church. And I'm telling you, you're going to find another church and another church and another church and another moment. And that translates into other relationships and everything in life. Listen, feelings are undependable. We can have those tingly feelings by just sitting across the table from someone of the opposite sex. Am I the only one? Seriously? I feel like I was thrown under the bus there a little bit. I started it. That's true, right? You can have those tingly feelings from watching a YouTube video. You can have those tingly feelings from taking a hot bubbly bath. At least I've been told. I wouldn't know. I really wouldn't know that one, but that's not faith. Feelings are not faith. It's wonderful if it lines up, but that's not what faith is. Faith is this confident assurance in who God is, who he really is. Not what we think of him as, but who he really is. And sometimes as feelers, we have the problem comes about that we over-sensationalize things. They did that in the New Testament. The followers of Jesus did. Here they are. They said they answered him, show us a miraculous sign if you want us to believe. And just make this happen, make this feel good, everything happen. And what can you do? After all, our ancestors ate manna. This is bread coming down from heaven While they journeyed through the wilderness, the scriptures say Moses gave them bread from heaven to eat. And sometimes feelers, you got to be careful the danger between these two. God on demand. God, give me, like Moses, a burning bush. Then I'll know. Just feel. Everything feels right. Then I can go forward in faith. But faith is this confident assurance that no matter what my feelings say, I'm putting my faith in God, my trust in God. Feelers, you have to be careful that you don't have a hardened heart as well. Because you got hurt, your feelings were hurt, God didn't show up like you thought he would or didn't answer a prayer, and then your heart becomes hard. This is Jesus speaking. He says, when you hear what I say, you will not understand. When you see what I do, you will not comprehend. Why? For the hearts of these people are what? Hardened. You see, we get that on-demand thing. God didn't do this, he didn't do that, and man, those Christians treated me like this, or I got hurt here, and we just harden our hearts to faith. All based on feelings. Be careful, because that's not faith. That's not what you want to be full of. Now, let me pick on the thinkers for just a moment. Let's go there. Let's say it one more time. Faith is one step at a time. Feelers, be aware. You can easily confuse faith with feelings. Thinkers, be aware. You may confuse faith with reason. Now, I can illustrate this one from a very personal perspective because I'm a thinker. I was telling a group earlier, it's like, man, I can't. They were talking about, what were you thinking? We were standing there in a group, and I said, man, were you just blank? And I said, no, man, I'm always thinking. I can't help it. Ever since I was a kid, Thinkers, we confuse it with reason. No, I want, as a thinker, all of my questions answered. Thinkers, you know what I'm talking about, don't you? When it comes to faith, if you just answer this question, God, then... And here, what I've discovered is, every question that gets answered, I got about 10 more questions after that. It brings up more questions. Here's one for me. I put my faith in Jesus as a teenager, but I still wrestle with questions. People, because I'm up here teaching, they think I have all the answers. I don't. I'm still wrestling with questions. I just got this one answered this last year, and it's bugged me ever since I became a follower of Jesus as a teenager. One of the ways that God is described in the Bible is the Alpha and Omega. Those are Greek words. The way those words are used to describe him, though, is it's beginning and end, Alpha and Omega, but it describes him as no beginning and no end. He has always existed. He is God eternal. Now, as a thinker, that bugs me. Even as a follower of Jesus, that has bugged me, and whenever somebody would ask me about it over the years, I'm like, I don't want to talk about it. Because everything in life has a beginning and end. That's how I reason. And I want that question answered. God, how can anything have no beginning and no end? Because everything I know of, my prism of life is beginning, end. Every person I know, everything about earth, every tree, all of nature. I grew up on a farm. Everything was born, everything died. Beginning, end. And just this last year, as I'm still wrestling with this, I'm 56 years old. I've been a Christian for I don't know how many years, since a teenager. A lot of years, I felt like the Lord gave me an answer. All the way from back to elementary math. Do you remember in elementary school when you started learning math? I started asking questions like, what's the last number? And they started using a word with me called infinity. Infinity and beyond, And it was still, I was like, wait a minute, there has to be, and I started grabbing this concept. What's the highest number? Infinity. There's no beginning and no end. And I'm like, oh, just this last year, I'm like, God, thank you. I love it when my questions get answered. This brought up some more questions for me, though. New questions. But see, the answer to my questions is not faith. It's not based on reason. I love it as a thinker when it all lines up. But when it doesn't, it's called faith. And that's what we're called to. It's faith. Now, as thinkers, you've got to be careful that you're not overanalyzing things. That's what we tend to do, is overanalyze things. Make sure that the light you think, these are Jesus' words, that you think you have, is not actually darkness. We can overanalyze, and man, God, if God's God, he will do this or he won't do that. Next week, I'm going to be talking about how can God, this is one of those gods that we have made a myth. How can a loving God let bad things happen to good people? Or things happen in this world? We're going to wrestle with that. So we overanalyze it. And it's about faith. The other thing we have to be careful of as thinkers is that we are not having prideful hearts. Feelers, hardened hearts. Thinkers, prideful hearts. We think we know it all. My wife will tell you I think I know it all. I know it all. No, I know I don't know it all. But man, in the heat of the moment, I have all the right answers. And she knows that. She's like, man, we've learned to deal with each other this way. But Paul, writer of most of the New Testament, and by the way, if you think, well, these are people who are followers of Jesus, no, Paul was a man who became a follower of Jesus. But before he writes the New Testament, man, he's religious. But he's trying to kill the New Testament church. Anybody who followed Jesus, he was trying to destroy them. He actually went to the government and got papers so that he could destroy anybody who was a follower of Jesus and stamp out the New Testament church. At one point, one of Jesus' closest followers, a man named Stephen, was being stoned to death for his faith. They took the coat and they laid it at the feet of Paul as he stood there and gave oversight to that stoning. That's who writes this. What happens to make him change? He has an encounter with Jesus. And he goes beyond reasoning to faith. And he says this, if you think you're wise by this world's standards, you need to become a fool to be truly wise. He's talking about being stupid? No, it's not what he's saying. He's saying, man, when we start thinking we have all the answers, we don't understand this God of infinity. Man, when we start thinking this is it, and we've got it all figured out, I mean, honestly, thinker, if you can answer every question about your God, is that really a God that you want to serve? If you can put him in a box full of all answers, come on, that's not even a big God. I mean, feelers, if you can explain away with feelings every feeling that you have and you can just put God in that nice box, is that a big God, big enough to serve and give your life for? I don't think so. That wouldn't even be God. Here's what I know about feelers. Feelers, you are great. It's very easy for you to take the first step of faith because it feels right in the moment. But as a pastor, I've watched feelers. It's hard for you to finish the race and the journey of faith because there are going to be moments when feelings don't line up. Why is that? Here's what I know about thinkers. It's hard for you to take the first step of faith. But I've discovered as a pastor over the years, watching a lot of thinkers, it's easy for you to finish the race. Why is that? The answer to both questions is simple. It's faith. It's faith. A thinker, once they've crossed the line of faith, they're like, I don't care what happens. I don't care. It doesn't have to make sense. I've put my faith in God. A feeler, man, when you step across the line, you got to step across and say, I don't care whether my feelings line up or not. It's faith. It's faith. That's what we're called to. Not a God on demand. Not a God who just makes me feel good, although I love it when he makes me feel good, and I'm not even a feeler. I love it when he answers my questions, but not a God of that. You know, sometimes the things God calls us to does not make logical sense. It's faith in a miraculous creator who loves us. I want to take you to Romans chapter 3, verse 22, because Paul, this same writer who had this faith journey, he writes this. We are made right with God. Let's read this together out loud. We are made right with God by placing our faith in Jesus. We are made right with God by having all of our feelings feel good. No. We are made right with God by having all of our questions answered. No. We're made right with God by placing our faith, our confidence, and our assurance in Jesus Christ. Now, for those of you who've never done that, you've never made that step, I realize some of you would say, well, that feels like a leap of faith. I would just challenge you, take the next step. Take the next step. Follower of Jesus, my question to you is, what is it you know you should be doing, growing in Christ's character, that you're holding back from? And you need to take that step. We all have a step of faith to take until the day we see Jesus face to face. Paul goes on here and he says, this is true for everyone who believes, no matter who we are, no matter what our past is, no matter where we're at on our spiritual journey, how long we've been followers of Jesus, this is true for all of us, that we would grow in and put our faith in him. I wonder, how on demand are you living in your relationship with God? How disappointed are you because he didn't meet your needs on your timetable in the way that you thought he would? And you've allowed it to affect your faith. You're no longer full of it. Let's be full of faith. What does that look like? Now, here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Take a simple step today. Take out your connection cards, and I'm going to ask you to drop those in the offering bucket here in just a moment. New folks, if you're here for the first time, we have a gift for you, so you hold on to them. I'm just asking you to take this simple step, saying, I will come back next weekend for part 2 of Full of It. Let's just take this faith journey together. Easy step. I'll be back next week. Did y'all know this is a day we have circled on the calendar if you're a sports fan? Next week is the Super Bowl. It's a big game, right? Man, it's not until the afternoon, so if you can't come to church, you're saying, I can't come. No, listen, we have church Saturday night. Did you know that? Yeah, we have a great service Saturday night, same service, everything is exactly the same. I'm actually going to be using, as we talk about why do good things happen to bad people, that concept of our faith. I'm going to be using, I had 3 or 4 testimonies, stories of NFL players who are followers of Jesus. And you're not going to want to miss this. Invite some friends. We're going to have some fun on the big game weekend, okay? Now, I want you to ask yourself, where am I on this continuum? What is my next step in my faith journey? Just be honest about where you're at. What's keeping you from taking that next step? Is it that I need some feelings. God's got to show up and do this and this and this. Or is it some thoughts, some questions, some answers? I'm going to ask you to take that step of faith. Faith is one step at a time. Now, I know you have faith. People tell me all the time, well, I would do that, but I just don't have faith. Yeah, you do. Here's how I know this. How many of you have flown on a plane? Anybody? Yeah. When you got on that plane, did you go out and do all the inspection of the engines and everything yourself? No. Man, you probably didn't even interview the pilot. What if his wife said, I'm having an affair and today's the day I'm leaving you? Do you want to fly on that plane that day? No. We have faith. And what's interesting is we have faith in our government that they're making sure all that happens. Young parents, let's think about this for school with your kids. Man, you tried to check it out, their education, but are you there all the time with them? No. You have faith that what they say is happening and all the things that are in place are taking place. That's called faith. Some of you, all of you who are sitting here today in the auditorium, you came in some kind of a car or a truck. Do you know how much faith it takes to drive on the road? I have taught 4 teenagers, my kids, how to drive. And if you knew how scary it is to sit in the seat teaching them how to drive, you'd be going, what am I doing on the road with these kids while they're learning? They're great drivers now, thank goodness. But do you know how much faith it takes? You have so much faith in the people who are driving on the road with you that they're not high, they're not drunk, they're not going to cross the line. That's faith. Somebody say, I don't know, I just trust that they have the system. No, I know you have faith even in me and in this church. And I know because I watched as you came in and you sat down. I watched. There was not one person who checked out the legs on their chair to make sure that the chair would hold you. And I cut the legs on one chair. No, you just came in. You just said, you have so much faith in us that we're going to provide you with a chair. Faith is just taking that step and putting it in God. I'm going to have assurance and confidence, God, that you're who you say you are and that you're going to do what you say you will do. Now, faith is one step at a time. As we take this today, wherever you're at on that continuum, what's your next step? That makes so much sense to us. I'll tell you from the sports world, even if you don't know baseball, you have first base, second base, and third base. And if you still don't understand what I said, you're like, I don't know what the baseball diamond is. What'd you just describe, first, second, third base? If I said, well, you're going to get in the game. Now, if you get a hit, what base do you think you should run to? Everybody's going to go first. There's a first step. There's a second step. It makes a lot of sense to us. Take the next step. Faith is one step at a time. Would you pray with me? Father, thank you for this group. We're gathered here. We've had some fun today. We've been challenged. Lord, there are those who, for them, they have had no understanding or even awareness or knowledge of who you are. And if that's you in this moment, we just say, God, I'm aware. I want to take a step of faith to explore what it means to have a relationship with you and who you are. If you're here as we're praying, you say, Jeff, I'm ready. I've been exploring this. I've been thinking about it. I've heard about it before. I'm ready to take a step of faith and put my faith in Jesus. Just pray this prayer. Say, Lord Jesus, for the first time in my life, I want to invite you into my heart. I ask you to forgive my sin. I ask you to remove my guilt and my shame. I'm taking this step of faith to have a right relationship with you. Would you draw me close to you relationally? Now, as we continue in prayer, if you're here and you're a follower of Jesus, as we're talking through this, every one of us has something where God's dealing with our hearts. And you may be saying, man, I've been resisting it, or I've been waiting on him to show me something or answer a question. What is that? Maybe you've heard it in a teaching over the years here at Alive, and you're like, I've been afraid to take that step of faith. Let this be the day. Just pray and say, God, I'm taking that step of faith right now. I need your strength. I need your power. And God, I ask for all of us this week that you would continue to reveal yourself to us. And would you show us, Lord, all of us, where we tend to treat you like God on demand rather than God of faith. Break through that barrier. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.